In this video, we'll be adding to the options menu we previously created by adding a scrolling controls settings menu that lets us add as many controls or keybinds as we need to and rebind them if we choose to in-game. In future videos, we'll be adding much more to the options menu, stylizing it, and finally showing off how to create settings-specific save data that is separate from player data. If you want to see that, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you don't miss them from being uploaded. As always, if you have any issues with the code or want to request a mechanic or idea, feel free to leave a comment. Now let's move into the editor and actually set this up. Now we are in our editor. I'm staring at the settings tab container that we set up in a previous video. All this is a control node with a tab container with a few tabs set out into a specific size. Now inside each of these tabs, we have labels, a margin container, and a VBox. The labels are just there as placeholders. Pretty much most of the stuff inside the tabs are placeholders. Now, in Editor, one of the easiest things you can do to actually scroll across these different tabs is if you go up to the tab container, you select the current tab and you select whichever tab you want to look at. In this case, we want to look at the controls tab because that's what we're going to be messing with. So to do this, what we are going to want to do is the VBox container we originally set up, we are going to delete. Now, inside the margin container, we're going to use Control A to add, and we are going to add a scroll container. A scroll container will basically allow automatic scrolling depending on how many nodes you have inside of it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, and I'll show you this by creating a few labels real quick. So, just to test in this label, we're going to make the theme overrides, the font size. We're going to make this font size kind of large. We'll do 32. Now you don't have to do this, purely just me showing something off. Now I'm going to duplicate this a few times. Realize that I'm forgetting a specific container. We need another VBox inside of here. There we go. Then we need to place all of these labels inside the VBox so they're all lined correctly. Now we're going to duplicate all of these labels a bunch of times. And if I hit F6 to play this current scene, we go to controls, you'll see this all lines up perfectly and nicely, and we have some scrollability in here. Perfect. Now, depending on how you size certain things, you may end up having an issue where your top line and your bottom line actually clip outside of the box and aren't entirely visible. Now, to stop that from happening in the future, one thing you can do to make your life really easy is inside the VBox container is add some horizontal separators or H separators. We'll add two of these. We'll put one at the top and one at the bottom. And now, because of how these separators function, you can go down into the theme overrides constants. You can add a separation amount. And this is going to separate up to down. You can do the same thing with the bottom one. You can add 32 there. Top one, make sure that this is actually doing it. 32. You'll see that this now push that text down. Perfect. Now, if you don't want the separator to have this little line, you can go down to styles. You can click the empty box and then create a new style box empty. And this will give you a blank line because it's just a completely empty style box. We'll do that for both of these. There we go. Now, if I press F6 and go into the scene, go to controls, you'll see the separation at the top. Now that might be a bit too much, but with what we plan on creating, this might actually be kind of perfect. And we'll look through that as we go and kind of adjust it as we go. So let's go and delete all of these labels if you create them too. And we'll just keep the separators because that's all we need. Hit Control S to save. We are going to go and create a specific button or a specific node that we plan on using for all of our hotkeying. So I'm going to create a new scene of user interface. I'm going to start with a control node. I'm going to name this the hotkey underscore rebind underscore button. And this will be one button that we'll pretty much duplicate over and over and over again, depending on however many hotkeys we plan on using. Now I'm going to hit Control S to save. Go into scenes. I'm going to save this into the UI, not the UI, the options menu. There we go. Because this is part of the options menu. Now, inside of this, we want to make sure that we are set to full rect on our control. Then we're going to use Control A to add. We're going to add a VBox container, not a VBox, a HBox container, sorry. So Control A, HBox container. This is going to be, its alignment will be center. Then inside of this, we're going to add a label. Then a V separator, so a vertical separator. Separate right there. This is going to also be inside that, not a child of the label. And then one more time inside the HBox container, we are going to add a button. So now we have this kind of sticky little mesh here. Like it's a little mesh together kind of thing. Now, what we want to do with this is make sure that this is at center, that is lined up correctly, make sure it's all lined up correctly. Don't want to do full rect. You want to go centered on that, or beginning. Beginning works, we use beginning. On the label, we're going to just type some text in for action. This is going to be the displayed name for the current action or hotkey that we want to change. And then the button text, we'll do action underscore key. This is just so we can see things a bit clearly. Now, the label is going to have some alignment settings. We're going to go horizontal, or we're going to go left in the horizontal and then center in the vertical. We are then going to give this label a layout or a custom minimum size of 400 by 30. So 430. You'll see it makes the box a little bit longer and a little bit taller. Now we're going to go down into the V separator. We're going to go into layout. Then the container sizing, we're going to have fill, and then we're going to click expand. Now under theme overrides, constants, we're going to change the separation to somewhere around 200 pixels will do for now. You'll see this is a pretty large button. We'll be able to modify this if it doesn't completely fit or if it's too big, too small. We'll be able to change this in the future. And then finally, we need to go to our button. Now our button needs to have the toggle mode toggled on. So base button disabled, toggle mode, button press. We want toggle mode and we want to click that on because we want our button to be toggleable. Now, one other thing to think about is how large the text is for our label. So I'm going to go down into theme overrides, font sizes, and I will give this a 32 pixel font size. Now this might be a bit too big depending on what you want to do, but for now this works. Now I'm going to hit Control S to make sure this is saved. I'm going to give a script to the hotkey rebind button. So give a script to the root node. Now I'm going to give this a class name, class underscore name of hotkey, just do key, there you go, rebind button. Now we need to create some onreadies for this actual node. The very first one is going to be for the label. So left click to drag, control drop to create the onReady. Got to typecast this as a label. And finally, we want one for the button and typecast it as a button. Oh, we get better intelligence. And finally, we're going to want one more exported variable specifically. It's going to be an export var. We're going to call this action underscore name. Now, the action name is going to be typecasted as a string, and we are going to set this equal to an empty string. Now, if you want to hard set it to something to start off with, you can. Now, what is the action name? Let's go up to our project settings, and go into our input map. The name that we're going to be looking for is the name that we've actually originally called these specific actions. So in this case, to move left, I've called it move underscore left. Now, you have to be very specific with this. So I'm going to name this move underscore left. Now, this isn't something players will ever see or have to mess around with. This is a primarily you thing for just setting up in the future. And this does have some error-prone ability if you add a typo or something along those lines. But trust me, you'll know if you had a typo. Now, let's go into our ready method. So func underscore ready. We're going to write set underscore process and then underscore unhandled key input. We're going to set this to false. So set process unhandled key input. What this does is when you are typing on your keyboard, if something's unhandled key input is set to true, any inputs that aren't being handled by something else will get picked up if this is set to true. Whereas if it's false, it'll just ignore them, which is perfect. That's kind of what we want. We don't always want to accidentally rebind our keys. Now, with that done, we're going to create a new function. And this one is going to be for set underscore action underscore name. It's going to have a void return type and no extra parameters. And in this, all we want to do is set our label.text. So we're setting our labels text, and we're going to set this equal to. So what do we want to set this equal to? Well, there are a few things we can set this equal to. For now, what we're going to want to do is set it equal to unassigned. And then we're going to call this in our ready function. So set underscore action name. So there are a few ways of actually getting the proper action name and then setting that as the text. But if you do that, you'll end up having this specific action name. I.e., if I just typed in the action name like this, this will give us the same text. And if I actually use the OS method, which is finding the specific action name, it will also name it move underscore left. Now, we don't necessarily want it to be called move underscore left, because having underscore and no capitalization kind of makes it look a bit odd. So to kind of fix this, I came up with a little match statement method that we can use. So we're going to write match, and then we're going to match the action name. Now, this is where things can get a bit large. When you're matching the action name, so the action name being anytime we press, type in this is going to match this name to some cases that we go to. So in this case, for move left, we're going to write move underscore left as a string. And then inside of this, we're going to set the label.text equal to move space left. This way it looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit more professional. Now, this isn't entirely necessary if you, depending on how you name your actions. Personally, I prefer naming my actions like this and then setting up a match statement to go through them all. But your choice. Now, I'm going to have a few specific actions. So move left, move underscore right. Do the same thing, label.text equals move right. And then finally, I want one for jump. So if jump is our action name, we'll do the same thing. Label.text equals jump with a capital J. There we go. This will make it look a little bit better, and a little bit make it look more function better. So Control S and save. So let's go and actually test this real quick and make sure it's working. Inside of our settings container, we are going to go to our VBox container inside our controls tab. We're going to use Control-Shift-A to add, and we're going to add the hotkey rebind button. Now we're going to add that between the separators. We're going to duplicate this a bunch of times. Now we're going to need to change the container separation for our VBox container. Change this to 64, make it nice and separate. Do for now. I'm going to change the two separators as well and make sure that they aren't kind of too big, and we can do this by control clicking on both of them because they're the same thing with the same settings. We go into the constants and we can change them. So let's change this down to 12 pixels for both. Now I'm going to duplicate these a few more times by shift clicking and duplicating them, duplicate multiple at a time. Now I'm going to use F6 and go into the scene, controls, and we can see that our statement is actually working, or our match statement is working. So the first one's move left. Let's change the second one to move underscore right. And then change the third one to jump. Now we're going to hit F6, go into the controls, and as you can see, move left, move right, jump. Perfect. So that works for us for now. Because we're only going to be needing these three, I'm going to delete the rest of them and move back into our hotkey rebind script. With our actions being set, or at least the labels text being set in a way that actually looks very readable and looks good, we now need a way of actually setting the text within the actual button itself, right? We need to actually figure out what the keybind is for the action we want to do. and we want to have that automatically set for us so we don't have to hard code in the specific keybinds. So to do this, we're going to write func, then we will write set underscore text underscore for underscore key. Give it a void return rate and no extra parameters. Gonna give myself a little bit more space. There we go. Now we're going to be using some new variables. So the first one will be a variable for the action underscore events. Now, because of how Godot is currently working, when you want to figure out what a specific keybind is or a specific key code is for something, or which key is being used for something, you can't just grab the individual key immediately. You actually need to do a bit of filtering. So what we're going to do is set up some filtering real quick. The first variable will equal input map. So we're accessing our input map, and then we're grabbing the action underscore get events. This is going to get every single event for X named action. In this case, the action that we want to get the event for will be the action name variable, or in this case, move left. So this will get every event available for this specific action. Now we could go print, and then we can print out action events, and then call this inside the ready function real quick, just to make sure. Set underscore text for key, hit save, hit F6, and as you'll see here in the output, we're getting all of this kind of code here. All of this text. We're getting the input event key, the key code for it, what key it is. In this case, it's A, it's D, and it's space. So those are the 3 buttons that I've named. Whether they are physical, pressed, or are they echoing. We get a bunch of different stuff that we don't actually need to know. So let's pull this down even more. What we want to do is now go var action underscore event. So we're grabbing a singular event, setting it equal to action events. And then because action events right now is an array, we want to access the first thing within the array. Now with that done, we're getting most of our key code, but we're not getting it entirely correctly and kind of making it easy to set text yet. So to do this, we're going to start setting our text. We're going to go button. Actually, let's do this in a bit more of an explainable way. We'll create one more new variable. We're going to call this action underscore key code. We're going to set this equal to OS, so operating system, dot get underscore key code string. So we're getting a key code as a string. Then we want the action event, so the specific event that we found, dot physical underscore key code. Now you'll notice I didn't get any autocomplete for that. This is a bit of a weird thing with Godot right now. So if you don't get any IntelliSense or autocomplete for that, don't worry too much. It's okay. It's just a normal engine thing at the moment. So now what I'm going to do to show this off is print the action key code out to screen. So we're going to use a print method. I'm going to hit F6, and you'll see A, D, and space. We are now just getting our key codes. Perfect. With us now getting our key codes, we now want to set the text on the button equal to the key code. To do this, we're going to go button.text. So we're accessing the text variable within the button, and we are going to set this equal to %s. Now, %s is a my years of Python, or my time of Python are coming back to me. Variable string. It's basically a way of inserting a specific variable inside of a string simply, rather than having to go through a bunch of different things. So in this case, you can just go percentage, so %s and then percentage, and then you would type in action key code. And that's it. Control S, hit F6, go in, and you can now see move left, move right, and jump, A, D, and space. So we now have these bound correctly. These are showing exactly what bindings they are for each thing. That's great. There is an issue actually that I'm having with this, and that is that these boxes they're not laid out in the way that I specifically want them to. Now, if you're not using any backgrounding, that's fine, but in this case, I want my boxes to have a minimum size. So let's very quickly go over to our button, and let's go down to layout, and we'll give it a custom minimum size. So for me, the X-axis is the one that's kind of giving me some struggles. So I'm going to overdo it and set it to 300. I'm going to hit F6. See how that feels. We'll go into the game real quick, go to controls. See, that is a bit too big. So let's go back and set this to 150. This might be a bit too small. There's a lot of little like testing that you want to do with this. Actually, that seems pretty good. I will probably bump this up to 164 because that might actually feel better. There we go. 164. Since space tends to be the longest word, having a box that completely handles space, it allows everything else to be centered and kind of comfortable. With our keybinds being registered and read correctly, we now need to actually go into the back into the script and set up the functionality for allowing us to actually bind our keys. Now, I had a little bit of a problem with this when I was designing it. And that is, usually, you'll see in most of my videos, when I connect signals to something, I connect it within the ready function. Now this might be as simple as turn it on and off again, reset the engine, see if it works. I actually didn't try that, but I'll be honest with you, the easiest way I figured out how to set this up in a kind of efficient way without getting too confused or too into the details is by going into Node. Like you hover over, click on button, go into Node, go into signals. We are going to want to grab this toggled button pressed, we'll double click on it, and then we are going to connect it to this receiver method that it'll create for us. This functions. For some reason, connecting it via text refused to for me. If you can get that to work, congratulations. I'll probably go back and redo that at some point and somehow get it to work. But if you can't, this is an easy way of doing it. So what does this function do? Well, this signal will emit when the button has been toggled, and it will emit a button pressed boolean. So it'll emit true or false whether the button is pressed or not. So what do we want to do? Well, first we'll go if button pressed. So the button is being currently pressed. We are going to set the button.text equal to, now I'm going to set this equal to press any key, and we'll give a couple of dots in there. We'll set it equal to this, and then we'll write else, just for now, just to top it off, we'll write else set text for key. So it's always good to, when you're designing stuff like this out, create a very solid foundation. So right now the foundation is when the signal gets toggled, it's going to do this. That's it. So let's go and test that real quick and make sure that our button signal is being fired. There you go, it is. But you can see there's an issue. I have to toggle it on and off, and I can toggle multiple at a time. So let's get into how to fix that and kind of make it function. Let's kind of flesh this out a little bit more. The first thing we want to do is set our process. So set process unhandled key input. We now want to set this to whatever button pressed is set to. So if button press says true, this is now set to true. If it says false, I won't even go into this, but it'll set it to false. Now, with that set, we now want to do a for loop. But before we go into a for loop, we are going to want to go into our hotkey rebind button, go to node, go to groups, and we're going to add a group to this. Now, actually, let's do this with the button specifically. We're going to go button, node, groups. We're going to give this specific button a group. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's very easy to iterate using a for loop over things within a group in Godot. And this is the best way that I've kind of figured it out. There are quite a few ways to do rebinds. This is just the most comfortable way for me. So we're going to give this a button of hotkey underscore button. I'm going to use Control Shift and left arrow to copy the whole thing. So do that, and then Control C to copy, hit enter. That way we have our group created. Now I'm going to create a for loop. So for I in, so for whatever I is going to be, we're going to go in get underscore tree dot get first nodes in, or not first node, we want to get nodes in group. And the group we want to get it in is the hotkey button. This is why I copy pasted it, that way I don't make any extra or any errors or any typos. And now we're going to iterate over all of them. So for this, we want to now check what I is. So we're going to go if I dot action name. I've just realized where I messed up here. We want to give the button, not the button, the group, we want to give the hotkey rebind button the actual control node of the group. There we go, button, there we go. So we know that action name exists within our hotkey rebind button, and every hotkey rebind button will be in the group hotkey button. So we now want to check the action name. We want to go if i.action name, so we're accessing the action name, and we're going to go does not equal or is not equal to the self.action name. So what does this mean? This quite literally goes, okay, I'm going to iterate over everything. Then I'm going to see what the action name currently is. And if the action name is move left, i.e. we have many hotkeys for move left, it's going to do something. Or in this case, it's going to stop something from happening. I forgot to write in up here. There we go. What do we want to check? Or at least what do we want to do if the action name is not the this specific thing? Well, we want to go i.button. So we want to access the button with an I. Then we want to set the toggle underscore mode equal to false. So this will now stop every other button from being able to be toggled. And then we want to triple check. This check isn't entirely necessary, but I found this kind of sets it up in a way that I wanted to. But we want to triple check and set our process unhandled key input for each of these buttons to false. With this done, we now need to make sure that when the button is no longer pressed, that these things reverse themselves. So we're going to copy this for loop. There you go. And we're going to slap this into the else statement. I'll put another space there, that way it's a bit more legible. And we want to kind of reverse the button toggle mode. So we want to actually set this equal to true, so the button can toggle, the other buttons can toggle again. Apologize if this is a bit confusing. It's toggling buttons and making sure hotkeys and stuff, it can be a bit complicated. With our buttons now being toggled, we want to first create a new function. And this is going to be a predefined function within Godot. This is going to be the underscore unhandled key input event. Now this is going to grab the key specific that we use when we press our keyboard buttons, right? So when the button is toggled, it's going to do something. In this case, we want to just set the button dot button pressed. So this is a toggle for the button. We want to set this equal to false. This way, when we press a key, it will untoggle our button. Let's now create a new function. So func rebind underscore action underscore key. Now, this is the button that's going to, or the this is the function that's going to actually be doing all of the magic. We're going to want to pass in an event, so an event in unhandled input, because we're going to be calling this in here. We're going to be passing in the event like so. We're going to give this a void return because it has 0 return types. Now we want to do something specific. We want to access our input map. So input map dot action erase event. So what this is going to do is going to erase the current event that is called action name. So that action, the event for action name will no longer exist. Then we want to grab the input map one more time. So input map dot, we want to action add event. So now we're adding an event. This is going to action name, we'll pass in action name, and then we will pass in the event. So what this is going to do is it's going to go, this is the action name, and then this is the event you want to add to said action name. Whereas this one is just removing the action. There we go. Action erase events. Sorry, I missed an S. There we go. Now, after this is done, we want to once again go back and set our process unhandled key input. We want to set this back to false, so we're no longer handling any extra inputs. We are then going to set the text for the key, and finally set the action name. Now we're going to hit Control S, and we're going to go give this a test and make sure it all functions well. So we'll hit F5, go into the game, go to the options menu, controls, move left, move right. Nothing else is toggleable. I could toggle this on and off by clicking on it, but I can also rebind them and only rebind one at a time. Now I'll be very honest with you, rebinding one at a time is a bit of a pain in the butt. So this is our hotkey rebinds all set up and sorted and completely reusable and expandable. That was one of the big things I actually wanted to go for with this, was making it really expandable. there is the issue, of course, of your hotkeys aren't going to save, or your rebindings aren't going to save until like when you reset the game. So you're going to have to rebind them every time. In a future video, we'll cover how to save that as its own unique save data within like a settings save data. There are a few games that do a lot of things like this. Take Rainbow Six Siege, for example. It has a ini configuration file, which will contain all of your graphic settings, all of your control settings, multipliers, all of those things. We're going to be creating something like that to make sure our game saves all of that data. So even if the player deletes their player data, they still have their graphic settings in there. So let's very quickly show off the scrollability of this. So I'm going to highlight my hotkeys. I'm going to duplicate them a lot of times, load up the game, full screen it, go to options, click through my menu, click to controls. We can left click drag, so we can drag the scroll menu. We can use our mouse to actually scroll, and we can rebind these individually. So we'll set move left to Q, move right to E, and jump to W. I'm going to exit, start game. This is me pressing E, Q, W. Now if I press A and D, nothing, space, nothing. So the hotkeys are rebinding correctly. That feels very weird to use, not A, D. Yeah, that's it. We are done. In the next video, I will probably be going over graphics and then sounds. Graphics will be relatively simple. It'll be setting resolutions, full screen, window, borderless, all of those fun things. Sound will be creating a audio bus and a kind of centralized audio system so you can adjust everything via sliders. And if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, all of the fun things. Leave a comment if you have run into any problems. And as always, I will see you in the next video.